Hi. I wanted to come here today to talk to you about the future of community journalism, because I really believe that when we're all reporting, we can change the world. And I know from personal experience that we can often find out more about what's happening in the world when the people that it's happening to are actively engaged in reporting it. My company, Ponderwell, wouldn't even exist if it weren't for the impact that community journalism can have on the people participating in it. And it gets even better if we can get all of you involved too. So let's talk about you. How many of you read or listen to at least some local news every day? How many of you would consider the internet to be your main source of news? How many of you would say you report the news? See, I'm going to bet that if I come back here a year from now and ask you these same questions, I'm going to see a lot more hands in the air. A recent Pew Research Center study indicated that those of you under 30 are the first group in history to consider the internet your main source of news. And the trends are that those of you over 30 are going to catch up with them in just a few years. Almost half of you get at least some news on your cell phones. And what you've all figured out is that you prefer to choose your news sources and the stories that interest you whenever you want to find out about them, rather than waiting around to see what's chosen for you in the newspaper that shows up on your doorstep. And this empowers people, and it lets them feel more engaged to make choices in their community, because knowledge is power. And I know that says knowing is half the battle, and that's because becoming active seekers of information is empowering, but it's only half of what's happening right now. And the other half is that we're becoming active contributors. A week into the Occupy Wall Street protests, a surprising number of Americans didn't know they were happening, and that was because the traditional media wasn't interested in covering them. The video that this image comes from, of protesters being pepper sprayed by New York City police officers, changed that. And the thing about this is that it was filmed on someone's cell phone. That person wasn't a trained reporter. They were just somebody that was there when the news was happening, and they thought the rest of us would want to know about it. And we did want to know about it. That video quickly got over 1 million views on YouTube. So community journalism is already changing the way that we view and interact with the news, through coverage like this, or the on-the-ground coverage of the 2009 Iranian election protests, or the Arab Spring protests of last year. But it doesn't even have to be that dramatic. All of these pictures were taken by local photographers who went out and covered local events just because they thought the rest of us would want to know. And that's good for us, both as readers and contributors of news. As a potential reporting base of billions, we're both more likely to be on the ground at the scene of breaking news, and more capable of covering in depth a massively diverse range of topics, simply because our numbers give us the luxury of micro-specialization in reporting. And as readers, we benefit from being able to get to that news of events as they're happening, and from being able to access a more diverse range of topics about what's going on in our communities. Millions of us are already participating in this process, but our podcasts, videos, reports are floating around out there on thousands of websites, like the billions of molecules in an interstellar gas cloud. But in the next 5 years, we will have a resource that pulls it all together and that we can naturally turn to as our primary source of local news. Because all we need is an outlet that has two things. A, good content, and enough of it that we feel fairly assured we're going to find what we're looking for. And B, a really positive community of both readers and contributors. And the two really go together, because if we have a positive community of contributors, they'll work together to produce higher quality content that supports and informs the community outside of our outlet. And when those communities see it, they're going to think, hey, I want to share what's going on in my community. Why don't you imagine with me what the news outlet of 5 years from now could be? I want you to imagine that you're sitting in a traffic jam and you're at a dead standstill. So you pull out your cell phone and you open an app for your local news outlet. It uses geolocation to scan for where you are and send you stories happening around you. And the closest one happens to be about the traffic jam that you're sitting in, because it turns out that a bear has wandered out of the woods and is standing agitated and confused in the middle of the road. Park rangers are on the scene, and they're trying to close in and get to a place where they can sedate it. And they're asking everyone to stay in their cars and stay calm. Fair enough, you think. But then something happens. You look out your window, and about 5 feet away from you, you see wandering out of the woods a baby bear. Nobody else seems to have noticed it. So in that same app, you hit document, you snap a picture, you hit report, you send it up to the news stream that you were reading. And while you're there, you hit alert, which sends a text message to your local emergency services. Within about 2 minutes, park rangers have found the baby bear, and you are, in your own small way, a hero. You spend the next 10 minutes happily chatting away with people stuck in cars all around you, which means we also just cured road rage. So all of this is possible right now. The technology exists, but the outlet doesn't. If you're stuck in that traffic jam, you probably turn on your radio and pray for information. Or if you're especially tech savvy, you might search Twitter for hashtags. And when you see that baby bear, you can take a picture and you can put it up on Flickr, but that's not news, because it's not connected in an informative way with what the community around you needs to know. And that's what we're going to change in the next 5 years. So let's talk about community, because it's the biggest part of community journalism, and without understanding it, we never get to that outlet of the future. As individuals, when we find out about or experience something that's interesting, we naturally want to share it with a community larger than ourselves. That's why community journalism works at all. And as news seekers, there's several reasons that we might turn to it. The first one of those reasons, excuse me, is if the news is happening in an area near where we are. And that makes us part of a proximity community. And what I mean by proximity community is like, if you go to a party and you walk in and you don't know anyone in that room, you still know you have one thing in common, and that's that you all chose to be there at the same time. And we often use proximity community as a first sorting point for news. But we tend to gravitate to a stronger form of community than that, and that's a concept community, one that's based on ideas or interests. In our party example, the people sitting on the couch talking politics are one concept community, and the people carving pumpkins at the table are another. And concept communities are really important to any community journalism outlet because essentially, our outlet is one big concept community. It's based on the idea that people can and should be their own best source of news for the events and issues happening around them. But we also have to encourage and develop smaller concept communities within that, all of which specialize in different topics, because that's where our outlet becomes really useful to the community outside of it. Now, there is a third kind of community that people tend to develop, and that's the social-emotional community. It's what happens when you just like each other. And this is the one that we programmers typically try to avoid. In real life, too, but also online. Because it's notoriously difficult to wrangle. But we also have to encourage these communities to grow if our outlet's going to truly succeed. Because it's the social-emotional communities that allow us to want to listen to different points of view, or to read up on topics that maybe we never thought were interesting before, and to really care about what the other members of our community are saying. So when we look at our news outlet of the future, we're going to find that it's built on systems that facilitate developing all three of these communities. But how do we put that understanding together with technology in order to create a platform for community journalism that really works? Let's look back at our bear event. One reason that really worked was because you were able to find the information that you were looking for quickly. So we obviously need a system to get breaking news up fast. And we also need to be able to target it by location, because we can use that as a first sorting point for the news. But a lot of times we go looking for information not based on location, but based on concepts. So imagine that you're going looking for the latest news on the Occupy Asheville protests. If you just do a search for Asheville, that's probably not going to get you what you're looking for fast enough. And we can build algorithms that will help us sort our reports into concept pools. But to be really good, we actually need community curators who can come in and bringing their understanding of the communities outside the outlet. They can help bubble up news into subsections in a way that those communities are going to find most relevant. Another reason that our bear story worked is because we had tools in place for collaboration. And in our example, this happened so quickly you might not have noticed. But when you sent your picture up to that news stream, you effectively collaborated on a breaking news story. So we need to be able to do this quickly and simply wherever we are. But if your picture just gets added somewhere down in a comment thread, that's not clearly adding to the news story. So we also need volunteer editors who can come in and working with the authors of the original content. They can get relevant information added to the original articles in a way that people can find it. But collaboration can be more than that. Because a lot of times, working together, we can produce higher quality content than any of us can by ourselves. Whether that means writers and photographers going out into the community together to cover an event from more than one discipline, or people working in the same discipline coming together in order to present a more complete story than either of them could by themselves. So we need tools both for planning and for real-time online collaboration. But what about our third community, the social-emotional communities? We really need to have tools for that too, because people wanting to come in and participate is at the heart of why a diverse bunch of stories can come together in order to create a useful news outlet. So we need to do two additional things. We need to reach out into the community to pull in as many voices as possible. And we also need to have tools that engender a sense of responsibility, both in the process and the product. And we can do that through tools like revenue sharing, powerful moderation tools, and community outreach, both online and in real life, because these can give us a sense of ownership in our community, and it can allow the community to grow and evolve and be invested in itself. But we also need to get creative when we start thinking about how the individual members of our community will interact with each other. So we can have a system like a tip jar system, which allows us to use the members of our community to use positive reciprocity to reward meaningful content in a really powerful way that matters a lot more than just a simple up or down vote. So these are just some of the examples of the things that we can build. And I wanted to explain them to you because I want you to understand how technology can be put at the service of building community in a way that allows us to build a better platform for community journalism than anything we've ever had before. But if you walk away from my talk with just one big idea, I want it to be this. We can use technology to create a real community around the concept of community journalism in a way that creates an environment that supports the development of really high-quality content and becomes a hub for communication. And while community journalism may never replace traditional journalism in arenas such as investigative reporting, with the right tools, it can become a richer resource for micro-reporting and community understanding. Because it's people talking about what they know, the events happening around them, and the issues directly impacting their communities. And that empowers people. And when we can do that, when we can report and curate our own news, we're no longer disconnected voices in the darkness. Instead, we become the source of news that we were looking for. Thank you.